Someone said to me once, I don't want to serve on the nominating committee for AFP because I don't want to encourage people, invite people, select people to serve the global board. I don't want to be a part of that. And my pushback to her was, how do we bring about change? If we have the same people making those decisions, it's an echo chamber, right? One of the steps to bring about change is to focus on that level of the organization, the leadership.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Birgit Smith Burton. Birgit, welcome to What the Fundraising.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm so grateful for your time and that we get to have this conversation today. I feel like you are somebody who needs no introduction, but I'm going to have you introduce yourself anyway. Tell everybody a little bit about you, your career, and what brings you to our conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I just read in an article this morning that I was quoted in that I've been in the profession for nearly 4 decades. Like, I've never seen it written like that before. I mean, that was jarring. I was like, whoa, like, I'm not old enough to be, in the profession that long. But yeah, 37 years. So I guess that's almost 4 decades. I have really only worked for 2 organizations, the United Negro College Fund, where I spent 11 years, cut my fundraising teeth, really learned about fundraising. Thank you to UNCF. I'm grateful to them. And then Georgia Institute of Technology, where I spent 26 years of my career in foundation relations. I was originally go into theater. Musical theater was my major. I left that and then I majored in media communications. I was going into broadcast journalism. And that would take another hour along the way to tell those stories. But I obviously ended up in fundraising and I've made a career out of it. But early in my experience at Georgia Tech, I realized I was not only the only frontline fundraiser of color on the development team, but I was the first fundraiser of color, frontline fundraiser of color that Georgia Tech had ever hired in 1998. So it wasn't long after, that realization that I actually went back to the Atlanta University Center, where the HBCUs in Atlanta, Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta, and the development professionals were some of the ones I had worked with when I was raising money for the United Negro College Fund in those historically Black colleges and universities, and created a network. Selfishly, I mean, people, give me praise and accolades for having founded the African American Development Officers Network. But Mallory, I did it selfishly 100% for me. I did it because I needed that community and that network. And then it grew. And now we have almost 4,000 members, and I am the founder and CEO. So I retired from Georgia Tech in 2023, actually retired in 2021, and they hired me back as a consultant for a few minutes. Then I was the global board chair for the Association of Fundraising Professionals for 2 years. So here I am.
Wow. I was saying to you before we clicked record, like, one of the things that I think is so inspiring about you is the way in which you have just walked straight into difficult systems, and where you could have tried to ignore them, maybe not the system, but the institution that upheld the system. But sort of instead of doing that, you have found ways to build not just community. I mean, maybe that had a selfish outcome, but you did that for a lot more than just you. And you've built that community, but you've also worked tirelessly to change things. And I'm sure not without cost to you emotionally and psychologically and all the things that come with that. But I'm curious, what has made you that way to sort of see something like that and say, I'm going to walk to the center of it and figure out how I can change it?
Thank you for saying that. And, until you said it a few minutes ago, I had never really thought of it like that. That's just who I am. But, I'm adopted. I was born in Germany to a German mother and a father who was in the military and did not stay with my birth mother. He left, and so I'm biracial, and she kept me until I was almost 3 years old. German was my first language. I use that as my excuse whenever I falter. I'm like, I'm sorry, German was my first language, 3-year-old German. And my adoptive parents, my dad was in the Air Force and stationed in Germany. They had been married for 10 years. They were childless. And it was during a time when, fertility, all of the different ways to increase the chance of having a child, they weren't as available, and adoption was one of the big options. And so my parents decided to adopt, and they went through an agency. My mother kept me until the day before my adoptive parents got me. And so there's some kind of resilience there, right, that became a part of my early life, but also some pain too, because they say that trust was really kind of learned and gained, during the first 5 years of life. And so that woman who was so important to me, my mother, disappeared one day. With all the great love and intentions that she had, there's still that pain. And so my adoptive parents were the most amazing people in the whole wide world, but they lived through the civil rights movement. My dad was in the Air Force. He was an engineer. My mom got a degree in nutrition, which, was a miserable part of my early life because every meal I ate was balanced, completely color size on the plate. My mother was from that, that education, right? Don't have any more of those potatoes, eat some more of that salad. I'm like, and so they met and married. And, my dad was the first in many ways in the Air Force in his career. And so these are the parents that I had, but they also, Mallory, were parents who were like, don't be the best you can. Be the best version of yourself. That's how you're going to succeed. Don't stand out. Don't overdo protest and draw attention to yourself. You can really succeed you have to be even better than anybody else. And so there came this point where I became a little rebellious, in that I'm not as rebellious as some of my friends who are 10 or 15 years younger than me now. I'm like, whoa, I would never thought to do that. But so that became a part of it. And also, I have this need to pave the way for others because some of the biggest mentors in my life paved the way for me. And so, for example, Charles Stevens, who really encouraged me to stay in AFP, because my first experience in Buffalo, New York, and I wrote about it, it's in Advancing Philanthropy this month. I walked into that meeting in Buffalo, New York, and nobody spoke to me in that AFP meeting. I never went back. Let me just move forward real quick and say, I've been back since. I went back last year and they welcomed me with open arms. As a matter of fact, most of the board members weren't even born when I was there at that time. So they take no responsibility for that, but they do take responsibility for welcoming back. But then I came to Atlanta, it was the same thing. People weren't speaking to me and not making me feel, warm and welcomed. And Charles Stevens, who was the first Black chair of the AFP Global Board, was my mentor. And he told me, there is a path that you're supposed to be on to pave the way for others. You need to stay the course. And so I did. And so I have found that when I've done that and paved the way for others, that's where I get my biggest reward. When somebody says, I did because of you, or I accomplished because you helped me, or I witnessed you. It's not easy, though. It is not easy, and I've had challenges. I, don't always talk about them, but guess what? I'm going to write about them. I am going to write about this. It's going to be a juicy book, let me tell you.
Hopefully you'll come back and do a little of your release tour here.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I think that's such an important part of the conversation, right? Because I think not only, do I watch the work you're doing and I'm like, does she ever sleep? Like, how does she do all of these things? I do not understand. But also,
Wait, let me tell you, let me
yeah.
interrupt that for 1 second and tell you, I have to learn how to change the setting on my emails so that when I send them at 2 in the morning, people don't know that I sent them at 2 in the morning, because I send them and I get these reply messages the next morning like, really? What were you doing up at 2 in the morning? I was like, busted. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so you don't sleep. So that question has been answered for me. But I think you also, like, there have been times, I'll just say, where I have wanted to personally cancel an institution or just be like, okay, I can't do like, but then I watch your leadership there and I think, okay, as a white woman, that's not fair. Like, figure out what it looks like to be a better ally in that institution. And but I can not imagine the toll that it takes to hold
Sure.
that, even when you do know it's having all of those
Yeah.
outcomes.
So what keeps me moving forward and making the effort, because believe me, I can get to the point, where I'm like, okay, I'm not giving any more of my energy towards that, is that coming together. And I have no problem using AFP as an example. Someone said to me once, I don't want to serve on the nominating committee for AFP because I don't want to encourage people, invite people, select people to serve the global board. I don't want to be a part of that. And my pushback to her was, how do we bring about change? If we have the same people making those decisions, it's an echo chamber, right? One of the steps to bring about change is to focus on that level of the organization, the leadership, and let's bring in different leadership, more diverse leadership, different thoughts, different perspectives. If you want change, this is one of the places where change can be made. So I encourage people to self-nominate for the board. My first year, I believe it was my first year as the global board chair, so that would be 2023, was the most diverse board in AFP's 62-year history, right? And so there were spirited board meetings, and there were some folks who, had been around a little bit saying, well, I'm kind of challenged with this. And I'm like, that's because there are unique voices in the conversation that are going to ask questions, that are going to lift up things that others have said, let's just leave this as is. So I feel that we have to be a part of bringing change. And if those people who are constantly there to keep, us from moving forward, continue in those places, in those roles, we aren't going to move forward, right? So, I mean, we've seen what leadership, good and bad, can do. So I won't go down that road today.
Well, what's your self-talk like around patience? As you're saying that, I'm like hearing the long game, right? But I also can imagine that in the day-to-day, when you're dealing with the urgency of the inequity in the moment, it's got to be so hard to stay focused on that long game. How do you do that?
It is. And let me tell you, I get upset, and I get angry. And I'm one of those people that I have to be still and be quiet for a moment, because I will type out an email that if I hit send, I'll look at it, half hour from now and go, oh no, I didn't. You know what I mean? Like, I can go there. So one of the things that I do is I have my group of people that they're passionate like me, but I have some people that let me tell you, they'll say, Birgit, think about that. Because if you do, if you call, if you post, this is what you're gonna deal with. So think about that. Do you know what I mean? And might there be a better approach? So it's, I'll have the passion, and I'll, be motivated and sometimes very angry, but I will listen to those people that I trust. And they're not people, listen, they're not people, Mallory, who are gonna praise me and co-sign every, thing I think of. That's how some of these celebrities end up in big trouble, because the only people they have around them, are the people that are going to tell them how wonderful they are and every decision they make is right. And so I make sure I have people around me who say, you need to think that through. or here's some, another road you could take, or here, and give me data, give me real data, because that's what people pay attention to. You know what I mean? If you can say, listen, this percentage of folks have experienced such and such. One that I like, and I don't want anybody to quote me on this. Look for the actual research was conducted by AFP. How I can't remember exactly what it was called, and I apologize, but they surveyed people on their experience in the development operation, and there were, I can't remember the percentage of people of color who responded, but what was interesting was the percentage of Black responders in fundraising who said that they left an organization because of racist behavior, racist treatment, but didn't report it in their exit interview, did not report it. So I believe it was over 50% that said they left for racist behavior, but they didn't report it. Wow. And what I find interesting about that is I was having a conversation with a group of vice presidents for development advancement and higher education. And they were saying, we try to reach out to, bring more diversity into our, institution and through the candidates. And we've had candidates, leave in the midst of the process. They might have been, one of two finalists, and they've bailed in the middle of it. We don't understand. We're trying. And, I said, you need to recognize that we may be a small community in terms of the percentage, of professionals. I think 10% are people of color in fundraising, and 4 to 5% are actually Black, right? And so I'm saying we're a small group, and we talk. So someone will call me, and listen, they do. I get calls every week. I'm interested in this position at such and such. Do you know anybody who worked there? Yeah, I know, so-and-so and so-and-so. And they will call them and they'll say, you don't want to work there. Listen, this is what I experienced. I left, but I didn't say I left because of this. And these vice presidents were in absolute shock. So they're saying, so we don't know. And yes, this is what, is being said about our institution. And I'm saying, yes, you really need to encourage people to tell you what is happening within your organization. I had a great experience for the most part, in my 25 years. But I'll tell you, one of the most heartbreaking things for me was someone I was very close to who was white, that I felt loved and valued and appreciated me as a professional, and yes, as a Black woman. When I left, I didn't hear from him for 2.5 years, and nothing, not a text message. And then I would hear from other colleagues, who had retired or left and gone on, that they had lunch with him or dinner with him. And then I got a text message one day last year, and I picked up my phone. I said, finally reached out to me. And I looked, and the text message said, thinking about you today. And do you know what day it was? June 19th. It was Juneteenth, the day that we recognize, sort of officially the end of slavery. And this was his reaching out to me in 2.5 years to say he was thinking about me on the day that we recognize, the end of slavery. And I thought, and there you have it. There it is. Yeah.
I'm so sorry that you had that experience. And I can't imagine, if you're already not feeling safe in a work environment, to then take on the role of trying to educate them around why it's problematic. Sure. But that is...
That one caught you off guard, didn't it?
Well, I think it's really, it's interesting. Part of me was thinking, I never made phone calls like that. Have you worked at this organization before? And I think about the privilege that I had in not feeling like I had to make those calls.
Yeah.
And the monster executive directors I ended up finding, how different the veil of the interview process is. And I hope that I think what's really important about this story is also that let's be who we say we are, and spend less time. I was thinking, okay, what if I was in a situation like that? What if I had taken on leadership at an organization that I knew had mistreated fundraisers of color historically, and I was now hiring for positions? how would I be transparent about that in those interviews? How
Yeah.
get uncomfortable and say like, hey, I want to talk about this thing so that there's no mystery that we don't know this has happened here, that we don't know
Right.
people have had these experiences. And I'm going back to something you said a few minutes ago that I think is so important in this sector. I'm curious like what you think about it. I also am the type of person where I want to be surrounded by people who disagree with me. Like I don't
Mhm,
have any
mhm.
interest in having a table full of people who give me thumbs up all the time. Like,
Right.
I want people who are going to challenge me, who are going to tell me where I'm wrong,
Mhm.
where I'm missing something, where my blind spots are. Like, and so, but I've been struggling, honestly, to find that sometimes in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like, hearing what you were saying about the AFP board and like, how do we create spaces with more sort of expected discomfort, but we
Mhm.
go into them knowing, yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable because that makes sense. And yet,
Right.
we still need to have these conversations. And maybe you're
Mhm.
not going to say everything perfectly. And maybe there is like, but
Mhm.
what does it look like for us in like, how do you think about creating sort of intentionally uncomfortable environments where we can
Mhm.
have more of that dialogue?
Right. The thing is, fundraisers, there are a lot of A personalities, type
Mm,
A personalities, right? And so, you get us together, and sometimes there are those that suck the oxygen out of the room. You know what I mean?
mm,
You barely get a word in edgewise. And we also don't like to be wrong. You know what I mean? And so you put all of us in a room together, and I definitely am one of those people that I have folks that will push back, I mean, say,
mm,
well, is that really what you want to do? And, that leader part of me and not wanting to be wrong was like, whoa, hell yes, that's what we're going to do. Cause I said that's, what we're going to do. But then I sit back and I think for a moment, I'm like, but that makes sense what that person said. And so I try, and I've learned, especially being the global board chair with a board that's going to express themselves, to really listen and
mm,
give people the opportunity to express themselves. And then let's find consensus, or let's agree to disagree and
mm,
find that place where, we can make the decision that helps us be able to move forward. You know what I mean? And then
mm,
not have an attitude about it. You don't want to
mm,
get out of a meeting and nobody's speaking to one another because, we
mm,
disagreed. But, we when I was responsible for, kind of helping to address what was going on in the Toronto chapter of AFP, there was a lot of pain and discomfort. And I had to help manage that and then communicate that to the global board that
mm,
wasn't in the midst of that situation. And
mm,
many had never experienced anything like that and really didn't feel it was our place to be vocal about anything
mm,
around that. But I felt that the largest chapter in AFP, right? And people were watching this particular instance. They were signing petitions and they were posting on social media. And so I met with the board and said, I think we really need to come forward with a statement. We need to show solidarity and support around what we are seeing that's happened, that according to the information and historical, information and research that was done, this is a part of what's been going on for a while. So we need to address it. And let me conclude that by saying, I was put in the position of having to appoint a president for the chapter because the entire board resigned and there
mhm,
was no board. And according to the bylaws, that would be cause for the chapter to disband and there be no chapter. And so I had to appoint the president and then together work with that president to appoint, sort of a core board, right?
mm,
And when I made the decision, chose the person, ran it, by probably 10 people to get their feedback and buy-in, and made the decision to ask Medea Akaruzi if he would be the president. And he agreed. And that was, let me tell you, the things that went into that were amazing. But the day that I did it and I posted that on LinkedIn, I turned off everything. I turned off my computer. I turned off my iPad. I mean, I sat on the couch. I was terrified because I didn't know how people were going to respond. And Mallory, I forgot to turn off my phone. And all of a sudden, the dings were coming in. Ding, 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 from people commenting and posting. And I finally couldn't take it anymore. And I looked, and people were giving a thumbs up and celebrating and, said it was a good decision. But you never know if that's going to be the case. Do you know what I mean? If a decision is going to be well received or if it will not be a popular decision, and you have to live with that as a leader. So I've grown by leaps and bounds just over the past few years. And, am I ready to take on everything? No, but I am not standing down. I mean, I'm moving on, and let's make this profession even better. Let's create spaces where people feel they're included and they belong. And, because at the end of the day, we support these nonprofits that depend on us to keep keep the doors open and the lights on and people served. And that is the most important thing.
I want to just end on that note. I'm so grateful for your time today, for sharing more of your story with us too, and what makes you who you are. I'm so appreciative of the work that you do, inspired by you. And yeah, grateful for the way that you're changing this sector. So I'll make sure that there's links so folks can go follow you on LinkedIn, connect with you, see all the incredible work that you're doing. Is there anything else you want to leave people with today?
Yeah, I'm not raising memberships for AFP on this, but I do want to note that this just came out. This is Advancing Philanthropy. There's a 4-page article in here. So if you're a member, you get this. If not, you can become a member and get it, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll get you a copy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.